What is happening? Welcome back to The Intentional Creator. My name is Dean.
And I'm Jackson.
And today we are going to be talking about the enthralling topic of should creatives go to college, go to university. I call it university in South Africa, but America calls it college. I think England says university as well, I'm pretty sure. There's like a distinction between college and university.
There is a distinction. I don't know it, but it's probably the same thing as like miles and kilometers. We're just going to do it differently.
It's so weird because a lot of the American colleges, their names are actually like their official name.
University of Colorado.
University, or University of Colorado.
Or whatever.
It's like, why are you? Okay. Anyway, but yeah. So the big question of should creatives go to college? I think we have a really interesting perspective on this because I did go to college for creativity. I studied visual communication design, which is essentially graphic design, but a little bit more broad than that and encompassing like different kinds of mediums and art forms. And Jackson did not go to college for creativity, but here we both are kind of on the same playing field, doing the same thing. So yeah, it's really interesting. I'd love to hear your initial take on it. I have some notes, but I want to hear your thoughts before I get onto my rambling.
My babblings first. Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting conversation. It's been an interesting conversation really for all fronts other than big medical science fields. I think it's a big conversation, but I think creativity especially, it's a really interesting conversation, like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Creativity isn't something you go learn necessarily. It's something you have, you find a flow with and you develop an innate kind of rhythm with. And that was my experience of creativity. You know, I kind of grew up around this kind of anti-college mindset. And so I never was going to go to college and never was going to engage in that space and in that playing field and didn't. And I think just like you would probably, your perspective of is probably a little bit of both. It's like there are both pros and cons to that. I think that it has really let my mind stay very open and creatively free in a lot of ways. Like I recognize that I have, of all of my creative friends, I have a very like innately unique perspective on creativity. And I think it's because I didn't go to college, because I think there was no like, there were no guidelines ever for me in the sense like what my creativity had to look like or had to feel like, which again has its pros and cons. It has its like, wow, that's amazing. And it's like, it also has a little bit of like, oh, well, there might be a little bit of a downside in the sense of professionalism that comes through from that. But for me and who I am and what I love that I never did. I love that I've got that kind of open creative design because it really helps me stay super centered in me and what my art is wanting to bring and what my passion is and what I'm trying to show up in. And, you know, the next step for me is really not the next step, but the next process that I've been recognizing is just like really grounding into that and finding my own container of what professionalism and structure looks like, since I didn't get it from anywhere in sort of like an establishment. Yeah, that's my initial thoughts on it. What do you think about like your relationship to how your college experience has affected your creativity, especially now being very like open to and having like really expanded your creative perspective?
Yeah, I think college is helpful, but not necessary. I think that's my first initial instinct. I think I did learn a lot. For sure. I think it was a great foundation of learning about creativity, of learning the theory behind it, like you said, the very professional guidelines, like this is how you do things, this is like how things work, this is what's good, this is what's bad. Obviously that's coming from a very formal establishment, so it's like in the grand scheme of life, like what is good, what is bad, it's all subjective anyway. So I think, like you said as well, like people that don't go to college are generally more creative in a sense because they don't have those guidelines, whereas people that do go into college, they all are kind of pushed into this very similar way of thinking and doing and creating. And so you almost are like more trained for the system in a way.
Right.
You're trained to produce and work for design agencies, production companies, all that kind of stuff, and how to work in those systems, which I guess is the point of university and college anyway, like regardless of if it's creative or not. Like you're training to learn how to work in society, how to work for other people. So yeah, I think it depends again on your intention and like what you want to do with your creative life. If you want to go work in a very specific industry for a very specific company, maybe you need a certain qualification. But I think for the most part, it's not really necessary. I think it takes a very specific kind of person to not go to college. And I think it needs to be somebody that's highly disciplined and motivated and that can create structure for themselves. I think if you don't have that discipline, not having any sort of structure enforced on you, you most likely won't get anywhere if you want to make creativity your career. Because like,
well, go ahead. Finish. No, you. I'd say I definitely have recognized that in the sense of like, since I've been on my own creative, like, I guess adulting professionalism, there's been a little bit of that disconnect between that kind of like discipline and stuff. And I've noticed how that has had an effect on my creative output. Like versus when I was younger, I really had some strong containers for myself and like my creative output was like through the roof. Yeah. And I'm really finding that balance of like, I also don't think that was super healthy. The way I was doing what I was doing was a little bit disconnected and naive. Which is fine, young, like I don't have any beef against that. But in the sense of like now on the back end of it all, I have these kind of two perspectives of like, okay, there was this one version of myself that was really focused and really disciplined and had that kind of like super strong, innately self-motivated desire and focus. And then there's been this other part of me creatively that's been really just kind of like letting things happen and letting things flow, which has also been great. And I've learned a lot from that. But then now it's like, there's a lot more introspection you have to do without that container and that frame. Like if you don't have that really deep process that you've gone through maybe this system, quote unquote, to find, there's a lot more introspection that you have to find within yourself as to like what and how you need to show up and what balance needs to happen within your system for that creative expression to come out consistently, which is the name of the game, especially these days. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it depends on the personality. Like, are you somebody that needs external pressure and structure to get things done, or are you somebody that can create that for yourself? And like there's no bad way either way. It's not like if you can create it for yourself then you're better than people that can't, like, or don't. It's just like you thrive better under a structure that's already there. Like, do you like playing a game that has rules, or do you like making up your own game and figuring out the rules as you go? I think most creatives probably like playing games that don't have rules. But when it comes to making money and making a career of it, you kind of need those structures and boundaries in place. So I think that's where college can have a pretty big impact on your life. I think
that like those rules and those structures, like, and this, because this is a question that I've played in and dabbled in the sense of like what your creativity wants to be is determined by how you're going to live your life, which is why I've like not jumped back in full on into the creative space. Like in the sense of like, okay, I've kind of got the avenues and the outlets to be doing creativity more full time if I wanted to be, but I don't really necessarily even want to go that direction because my system wants to set up other systems in place to help support me financially and monetizably and like that sort of thing, so that I can stay in this place of like open creative freedom and not have to worry about how I'm making my bills. And not to say that that's bad at all, but in the sense of like, you really have to play with that balance in yourself creatively, in the sense of like how you want to be in your creative practice and be in your creative art. Do you want to be relying on your creativity to make your money, or do you want to be relying on some other avenue of income so that your creativity can stay in a self-expressive place that can kind of be and do what it wants to do?
Yeah, I absolutely feel that, and I've questioned that so much throughout my life as well. As like, because it's hard making a career out of creativity, like a good solid, unless you're working for somebody else. Like being a freelance creative is a difficult place to be, which is why I'm like trying to expand and like grow a business now and not a freelance business. And like you can do it, obviously there's tons of successful people out there that do creativity professionally, but it's difficult. So again, if you're somebody that can handle financial stress and pressure better than most people, then maybe you can take on the freelance creative life. Going that direction also means you need to learn about all that stuff. You need to learn about business, about taxes, about financing, about budget. So if you're somebody that likes being in those positions of like being forced to learn about yourself and how the world works, then you don't really need that structure as much, I don't think.
Right, because you can self-impose and create that for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually did want to speak about finances as well, because I think particularly in America, like going to college is quite a burden, like compared to South Africa. I think my degree was like, I want to say $3,000 or $4,000 a year, whereas in America, like it could be I don't know,
$30,000 or $40,000 a year,
$20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. So that's quite a significant difference, and most people in America go into debt to go to college. And so I think it depends on your financial situation as well. Like, can you actually afford to go to college for something that you don't need to go to college for? I think if you can afford it and you are the type of person that thrives in that kind of structure, then for sure, go for it. Like, it's not going to be a complete waste of time. If you're somebody that is going into debt, I would say don't go into debt if you're going into the creative industry. Like, don't go into debt to go to college if you want to be a creative. That's kind of dumb.
Yeah, that feels like good advice. That feels like really solid advice.
Yeah, because I think...
Well, that's again the debate that I've been in of just like, okay, am I... And I guess this is me having not gone to college because my mind doesn't work in those sorts of ways. So it's like, okay, wait, how can I think about my finances and my livelihood and my lifestyle in a sense of like very business, very like externally creative? How can I almost like protect that creative muscle in my system and create these other avenues and these other funnels to make the money and to support me in a lot of ways? So I don't have to be utilizing all this creative energy to create that income stream. And again, this is just my kind of personal journey, but it's just how I think about it. Because of the journey that I went through with my creativity, I found that I just got burnt out. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying it as much as maybe my other friends or whatever. Maybe because I didn't have that frame and that container that I never went to college. I never went to those kind of regular schooling systems. And so I never wanted to create in those ways. And I always wanted to kind of create out of a heart-centered expression. Mm-hmm. And so, again, pros and cons there. I both really appreciated that because it's created this personality in me that's really defensive around my creativity and protective around my creativity, because I want my creativity to bring out whatever I want to say versus like whatever maybe a client wants to say or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the prospect of like the fact that like it's taken me a lot more of a journey creatively versus like, you, Dean, or some of my other friends who have not been stable necessarily, but had a little bit more rhythm with how they're showing up creatively and stuff.
I don't think that comes from college necessarily. I think, again, that's more personality than college. Because I know some people that I did study with that had way more of a volatile creative career afterwards, but I know some people that were way more stable. So
I guess that's true in the sense of like it's not necessarily college. I think just since we're in that kind of like framework of thinking, but you're right, it's not at all that way. And I think I guess that there's just like a huge part of that creative journey and creative process. I think my system was just kind of thinking about like coming at it from the financial aspect. Like if you really want to just get into it from a professional sense, it might make sense to go to college, and it might make sense to like learn that professionalism, go learn what you need to learn graphic design wise, angle wise, to make sure that those channels are open. If you're not necessarily wanting to make your funds through that, like how can you spread out and put eggs in multiple baskets so that there can be different forms of income streams and that kind of thing. And that is in and of itself also another creative, really deeply creative process to figure out how that works and how that flows and how that moves, which is a lot of what you're saying and what you're doing in the sense of like not going away from freelance into a very business model mindset, which takes its own kind of creative energy to do in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And it's just being intentional about your decisions and how you want to live your life. So it's like you need to get clear on your own life almost before you make this decision, which is difficult because when you're 18, it's like you don't really know what you want from life yet. So that's why I think taking a gap year or even a couple of years is so beneficial. So like even if you're on the fence about going to college, if you're on the fence, take a gap year, take a year to figure out if you actually need it, and be really intentional about what you want with your life. And even if you still want to go into a creative career, like try and get really clear about what direction you want to go into and see if you actually do need skills from a college, because so much of the creative skills that is necessary nowadays can be found on YouTube. Like my full-time career right now is video production and design. Sure, I learned design at college, but video, that has all been self-taught. No one taught me video at university. And that just came through YouTube tutorials and practice and experience. And so, like, if I had to tell myself back when I was starting, like, if I wanted to go into video production specifically, you don't need to go to college. Just go make films. Go make a lot of them and keep doing it. And get on set, get experience, go shoot with people, shoot by yourself. Like, it's just going to come with time and practice. But for example, if you wanted to go into animation, even animation, there's probably a ton of tutorials on YouTube nowadays. I'm trying to think of a specific creative discipline that you do need more of a formal training for. But honestly, I feel like most of it is on YouTube nowadays. Maybe like if you need something where it's very specific machinery or tools, like heavy printmaking, like advanced printmaking stuff where you need big presses or like I don't know, but
that's so niche already. Like that's so just like nichely create. I think and that's the cool thing about the internet. What the internet has done is created this conversation. Because back in the day, you would have had to go to college because you needed the physical things you needed to get your hands on that maybe you couldn't afford yet. You needed to go see and talk to the fewer percentage of people who have done it professionally, because there's not many people that did it. You know what I mean? But nowadays, especially creatively, like everybody's done it, everybody's doing it kind of thing. And it's really just a matter of taking the time to sit into it and actually focus on it and find your niche and your expression and your flow and letting that kind of pour out of you. And it just opening up those channels, I think, is what it is now. And it's just it's really a question of self-belief of just like, you got it, just go focus on it and spend a lot of time on it to develop those skills and develop that practice and develop that consistency. And you can really do that in whatever field you want to do it in. Again, like you're saying, there's a couple niche probably things.
Yeah, on that, I wanted to speak a little bit about the benefits of going to college. First of all, like we just said, access to equipment. I remember when I was starting out and like making my YouTube videos, I think it was an old Samsung laptop that it was so laggy. I had to edit everything in like 144p. It took me forever to make an edit. It was crazy. Nice. But my university computer lab had iMacs, and so I would wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and go edit my vlogs before class on the iMacs because it was so much easier and quicker. And so just having access to really specific equipment that makes your job better and makes you able to learn faster is invaluable. I mean, obviously you're paying that through the cost of your tuition, but if you need specific equipment, that is super awesome. The next thing is just connection and friends in the creative industry. I think it's kind of difficult, or could be difficult, again, depending on your personality, to make friends and business connections if you don't go and you don't have any insight into the industry that you're in. I'm sure, like, for you, for example, you've made tons of friends, but just because you're a really social person, and like making those connections is what you love doing. So,
well, I also just like when yes, there is definitely a personality part of me that's definitely like that, but I also know that like when I turned 14 and 15, I realized I was like, oh, I don't really have a lot of friends, like, and I don't know how to like be connected with people, and so I studied it. Like, that's a huge reason why I'm so extroverted and so personable and know how to talk to people, is because I just like I took like 2 or 3 years and just studied people skills and just studied how to talk to people and how to like get people interested, around people. And so that's both like going to do it in person at a college, super valuable. Also, there's tools and practicality in the sense of like, if you've got that kind of desire, to follow that desire and let it teach you and let go into the people skills and like learn that. Both of them at the same time would be even better.
Yeah, and I think you learn different ways of learning those skills. Like,
totally.
If you're in college, you're going to be like almost forced into making those connections a lot easier. Whereas if you're out of college, you have to have that drive to make those connections. So you're learning skills on either side. Again, it just comes down to your personality and like what you prefer doing. It's going to be easier making those connections and creating your professional network starting in college.
Right.
Because like once you get out, you never know what opportunities are going to come from people that you studied with, like even if you weren't necessarily friends with them. So yeah, connections, friends, community. I think being able to bounce ideas off of people when you're learning as well is really valuable. I think one of the biggest challenges with learning, being self-taught and like learning through YouTube, is that sure, you have like YouTube comments and stuff, but there's not like a close personal relationship with somebody that's guiding you and teaching you. So like getting personal guidance from a lecturer or a teacher is really nice to have. And just, to have people to bounce ideas off of that are going through the same thing and like the same project and situation.
Super valuable.
Yeah.
And I never got to experience that, and since I never went to college, and like I definitely know that there's a lot of like professional technical things that I still am lacking in and struggle in, because I'm like, I've never been around a crew like this, and I've never worked with energy like this, and so I actually don't know, versus where you're a little bit more like probably able to like either A, ask questions if you don't know something, or B, have an ability to understand what's going on and how to make it function and how to make it work and go through the processes a lot quicker. I think that from a technical vantage point, like if you're trying to go be on set, if you're trying to go be in a technical relationship to your creativity, I think college is really valuable and really important. If you're trying to be an expressive, like I want to let out whatever's in me and like there's uniqueness that I want to express, maybe not. And maybe that's like a good kind of place to start from, in the sense of like what's going on within you. It's all self-awareness though. You got to kind of have a relationship with what's going on in your system and what you want, what your vision is for it, which might change. Like originally I wanted to be a film director. I wanted to do like Steven Spielberg kind of stuff and like direct stories like that. And then as I evolved and as I grew, I was like, actually, that's not necessarily, and as the internet evolved and grew, not necessarily what I want to do long term. It's a little too slow and clunky for me. Not that the films are clunky, but it's just like a long process, a 3 or 4 year process to get a film done and out. And I'd rather get something done and out within 3 or 4 days and cool. Like, what's the next idea I want to talk about? It's probably the ADHD, but we're not going to, that's the internet's fault. Well, but in the sense of like, I do like playing with all sorts of creative ideas that maybe you can't necessarily tell in Hollywood or in some sort of theatrical performance.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, but that's also not to say that you can't play with those ideas once you graduate as well. But I totally get what you're saying. Another one is the confidence that comes with quote unquote formal training. I think when you get any degree, you get this you not only get the piece of paper, but you also get the ability to say that you have a degree and you've done the work, you've done the training. So even though it might not help you get a job necessarily, it might not make your portfolio better, it almost gives you this like mental up in just being able to believe in yourself and be like, yeah, I've done the training. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about.
Super valuable.
And that's huge when it comes to creativity and like the business of creativity. Because it's all subjective, your confidence in what you do has such a massive role in you being able to be successful at it.
Yeah. Well, and like I definitely resonate with the opposite side of that. Of like not having a degree has like really made me work with my confidence levels. Or like not having a degree or like a really clear technical analysis of what can be done or what needs to be done. It makes me overwork my mind in a lot of ways where I'm like, wait a minute, am I really a photographer or whatever? Even though I've been doing it for like 10 years at this point now and definitely am, there's still those questions that come up and there's still those things that come up. So I think that's a super valuable point in the sense of like really spending the time to take a year to 4 years to really like lock that dialogue down and shut it up and just say, no, we're solid. We know what we're doing. We know how to do it. We know how to show up. There might be things that come up that create a little chaos, but at the end of the day, I've got the foundations to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally, it's just getting the theory in behind all of the technical aspects. Like, you know why certain things are the way they are. Whereas if you don't go to college, not that you can't learn those things, but I think a lot of the time we would just skip straight to the technical, like how to do this thing. Like most of the, again, using YouTube as an example, like you would look up design tutorials, you wouldn't necessarily learn why that occurred and why that happens and why that is the way that is. Yeah. And like, not that you need to know those things, but I think it definitely helps give you a better understanding of why good creativity is the way it is. And again, that could be an advantage or a disadvantage. If you don't go to college, you might not know any of that theory, and that might serve you better because then you can be, quote unquote, more creative and more free and more expressive. But at the same time, if you know it, it's knowing the rules to break the rules. So, yeah. I don't think there's like a right answer.
I think it all comes back to the self-awareness thing. Like it all comes back to like what your relationship to your own creativity is and what it looks like. And like you're saying that, because I think it comes back down to the confidence at the end of the day and the self-belief at the end of the day for either side of it. Either side of it, you need to be able to be grounded in your self-belief within yourself. And I think that there's ways that you can learn that outside of college, maybe like I have, and there's ways you can learn that inside of college, maybe like you did to some extent. And I think that both options are valid and valuable. And like, if you can find your wave to ride, run it, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I feel like we've gone over pretty much all the points that I had as well. Let's do, if you had 30 seconds to tell somebody that's finishing up high school right now that loves their art classes, their design classes, their photography classes, and they asked you for advice, what would you tell them? I know we just spoke about all this, but if you had to condense it to like 30 second, like here's what you should do.
Trust that intuition. Trust that knowing. There's something there that your being likes. There's something there that you like. Don't doubt it. Don't try to go do something crazy opposite of that because somebody else is telling you need to go do something opposite for stability's sake. See if you can't take a year. See if you can't take a year and travel or go do something that feels intuitively kind of fun to go play with. Go do some like handyman work or like something with your hands. Go create in a different way, but in a way that's leading you, and then meditate on these questions. Not in the sense of like you're sitting down and you're chanting, but like in the sense of like, think about it. think about these things this next year of your life. Try not to get super wrapped up in all the distracting things that the world brings. Not that that's not going to happen, but try to find space and centeredness throughout your day to come back to this question of like where and how you want to learn, where and how you want to show up creatively, and your answer will show up and give itself to you. And if you already know, run it, jump into whatever direction that means. But if you're kind of navigating that, take your time. Don't rush into that decision immediately. You got life all ahead of you, and it'll show itself to you. What about you? What would you say?
That was beautiful. What he said. No, I would say it's difficult to condense it all down. I would say I'm going to start off with college is helpful but not necessary. If you want to be a professional creative, you don't need a college degree to do that. So in saying that, if you are absolutely sure that the career path you want to go into needs a college degree, if you need very specific skills, if you need very specific equipment, if you need very specific experience that you can't get outside of college, which is very few, then only go to college right now. In the meantime, I would say take a year to figure out where you want to go with your life, what you want to do with your life, what it looks like, what role creativity would have in your life. Do you want to work for another company? Do you want to start your own business? Do you want to be a freelancer? Try and get as clear about all of these questions as you can while experiencing the world, doing other forms of work, experimenting, making as much as you can, practicing, do the thing that you love to do, with no bounds, with no restrictions. Who knows, you might take a year off, and through that you might explode into your own freelance career and love it. And then what's the point of going to college? If this doesn't happen within the next year, and you get really clear that you do want creativity to be a part of your life, you do feel that college would be a good experience for you, you can afford it financially. If you can't afford it financially, then don't do it.
Go live
if you can afford it, if you want that college experience, then go for it. Go have fun, learn as much as you can, make the connections. When you are in college, I would say take it seriously, but not too seriously. Especially, it's different if you're doing like a medical degree, where you obviously, if you're a doctor, you need to know what you're talking about. Not that you don't as a creative, but creativity is so subjective that there is no right answer. So take everything in and choose what works for you. See what works for your discipline, your personality, your style. Make connections with people, talk to people, get curious, and just learn as much as you can. Sweet.
I love it.
That was way longer than 30 seconds. but that would have been some cool advice that I would have liked to hear.
Yeah, I agree. I would have really appreciated that advice.
Yeah.
Sweet. Another one down. It's always great chatting with you and chatting with everybody who's listening.
Yeah.
Shoot us DMs.
Guys. We
Absolutely.
appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Cheers.